How to survive in Hollywood. If you're a creative person and you're thinking about actually having a career as a creative professional in Hollywood or otherwise, we've done a number of episodes on different viewpoints related to how to make that happen. Today I'm going to be interviewing somebody who spent his life at the network television level, and today is going back to try to make an impact with people who are leading networks, leading film studios, and making a massive difference in the entertainment industry. I'm Phil Cook, and today we're going to interview Dan Rupple, an old friend here in Hollywood who started out the beginning of his career professionally on a national level with Isaac Air Freight, founding member, right?
Right, and I think both people in your audience know about that.
Well, you've got to be as old as us to really know about Isaac Air Freight. Trust me, I saw them in college perform, and they toured the country. You did albums, you did the whole thing, right?
Yep, 8 albums, about 500,000 records sold.
You kind of pioneered what we call Christian comedy, right?
Right, that's right. You go back to the late 60s, early 70s, it was the Jesus movement. You know, the Jesus people were coming into the church, and they wanted to express themselves in the art form they were accustomed to, which was rock and roll music.
Right.
So you had all those early rock bands, and they were playing and stuff, but it wasn't happening in comedy. And suddenly our group came, we were raised in comedy clubs. None of us were raised in church. We got saved out of comedy clubs, came to Christ, and we launched into Christian comedy. And we always tell people, Phil, that we didn't know that you weren't allowed to do Christian comedy in the church, and we got a little bit of pushback, but overwhelmingly, the Christian community embraced us.
Interesting,
we pioneered that.
So at some point you came to Hollywood. How did that happen?
Well, I was born and raised in the area.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, and my wife and I have raised our kids here in Southern California. So I was raised here, and going back to the comedy clubs, the school bell would ring in high school, and I'd drive up with my team, and we would perform at the Comedy Store and the Improv and all these clubs early on. And I started when I was 15, so you had to lie about your age because they served alcohol. And so I was always in that culture and in that industry. And then I did Isaac Air Freight for 15 years, toured all over the place. And then when I left there, the Lord opened a door for me to go into CBS television. That's how I really got into mainstream.
How did that happen?
Well, what happened was I left Isaac Air Freight.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was going to do. In fact, my partner said, what are you going to do now? I said, I don't know. I might be working at Taco Bell tomorrow. I don't really have a game plan. And I went on a camping trip with some friends, and they were, one night around the campfire, they were playing this board game, Categories. And I couldn't sleep that night. All I could think about was, that'd be a good TV show. That would really be a good TV show. So the only person I knew in the industry, in that part of the industry, was Mike Klossman,
Mike.
Dear friend. So I called Mike and I said, can we have dinner or anything, or coffee or whatever? I want to talk to you. And I told him, I said, I left Isaac Air Freight, and I would love to get in the TV industry. And I was thinking he was going to say, yeah, we got a guy that needs to sweep the floors. I was ready for ground level. And he goes, Dan, too bad you don't have a game show. I go, I do. I just created one. So long story short, Phil, we developed a game show, pitched it to CBS. We got a developmental deal.
Okay.
And then Milton Bradley stepped in, who owned it, and would not give us the rights, which is kind of insane.
You're kidding.
Which is insane. I mean, you got a network that wants to put it on the air, and they said no. Right at that time, they needed a supervising producer on The Price is Right.
Interesting.
And Mike said, hey, do that, and and the rest is history.
Now, explain to me what a supervising producer does.
Well, as you know, there's the above the line, the below the line. The above the line is the creative elements and the talent, the director, the writers, whatever. And then the below the line is your technicians, your crew, etc. And I supervised the below the line.
Okay. And you worked for the studio.
I worked for the studio for CBS and not for Goodson, which at that time owned The Price is Right, but I interfaced with the Goodson staff, of course, Bob Barker, on a daily basis.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. So, and you went on to work with David Letterman?
Right. In 1993, I believe, CBS signed Letterman away from NBC, and he wanted to do a number of shows in Hollywood, and they came out, the producing team came out about 6 months before they were going to do the shows, and they said, we want Dan Rupple to be the supervising producer on these Letterman shows. And they said, why do you want Dan? How'd you hear his name all the way in New York? And they said, well, we heard his reputation that his crews will do anything he asks them to do.
Interesting.
And what that was, Phil, is not that I'm this great guy, although you know I am.
Oh, of course you are a great guy.
No, but what it was is the fact that I really cared about my crew.
Yeah.
I had 100 people under me, and The Price is Right. And the Lord told me the day I started, make a touch point with every single person on that crew every day. And sometimes it might just be, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
Other times, and that's what really opened the door where they trusted me. They knew I care about them.
Right.
And suddenly, the most crusty stage managers taking me over by craft services and going, hey, I just found out I got cancer. I remember one time a guy, and this isn't really that funny, but it's kind of humorous. He said, can you do whatever you do? And I said, well, what I do is I pray. And would you mind if I pray for you? No, by all means. Yeah, that's different. So anyway, that's my time at CBS.
That's a great leadership point. John Maxwell talks about the fact that every leader needs to walk through the factory. You need to know people. Too many are in these elevated offices that nobody ever gets to see or nobody ever gets to meet them. And so that's a real testament to the fact that you were in LA, but the studio in New York heard about you and they understood it.
Right.
So that's a powerful testimony.
Yeah, it was great. And I loved it. I'm still in touch with the old Price is Right team. I'm still even though Letterman's off the air, he's been off for a couple of years now. I'm still in touch with that team.
Interesting.
It's great. We still have these lifelong relationships.
Then when the internet blew up, you left network TV and got involved with some internet.
Yeah, that just was kind of a fluke timing. What happened was I left CBS and I served as an executive pastor at a large church for 3 years.
Wait a minute, transition from a network executive to pastor.
Yes,
how does that happen?
Yeah. Well, it happens. It's a God thing. My pastor, I was doing The Price is Right. I was doing Letterman. I was loving life. I was living large. And my pastor came to me and said, Dan, would you consider being my executive pastor? And in my mind, I'm thinking, are you nuts? I'm going to leave a gig like Price is Right to be the executive pastor, not even the head guy, And I thought the Lord would have me show him the respect to give it some thought. So Peggy and I that's my wife, went to Palm Springs and we fasted and prayed for a weekend. And nothing from the Lord, and suddenly we're by the pool, and boom, this download in both of us, you're supposed to do this out of obedience. So I resigned from CBS, I took over with Price is Right, the church, pastored, and I did that for a season of 3 years, and then I felt the Lord saying, now I'm calling you back to the entertainment industry.
Interesting.
Now, this is the transition that makes it to digital. People's memories in this industry are short.
That's for sure.
So I left pastoring and I thought, I got all these connections in television. I started writing sitcoms. Yeah, I'm going to get in there. Nobody would take my call, or the people who would take my call weren't even in those positions anymore.
This is a lesson about Hollywood. You're out for what, 5 years?
3.
3 years, just 3 years.
Yeah.
And you'd think in that short amount of time, the network or the connections and the networks will still work, but they don't.
My name's been erased. It's not there. I guess we did have cell phones. We were just having, so I guess they deleted my contact. But anyway, so what happened is I went on a radio show, and I was being interviewed about comedy.
Okay.
Because they remember, all of the stuff with Isaac Airfreight, and so I'm talking about comedy, and a gentleman heard it. And he owned a TV show about cars for car enthusiasts, and he wanted to launch a website that had comedy videos that were car-centric.
Okay.
And he called me in. He said, how about you do funny videos around cars for my website? Now, that was in 2004, and the reason that's an important date is the digital revolution as we know it, which is really when YouTube launched, when suddenly text-based websites became more video-based, and image-based websites, that was 2005.
Interesting.
So by the time the explosion happened, I'd already produced 150 short digital, what we would say now is YouTube-ish, type pieces.
Okay.
So I always tell people that, in an industry that was 15 minutes old, I'd been in it 20 minutes, so suddenly I'm the expert. And that's what gave birth to a number of years of consulting with Christian organizations, universities, denominations on digital strategies.
Interesting. Okay. And you became the head of programming for a number of networks
Yeah,
eventually,
five
right?
different internet television companies I was the head of programming for.
So how different is the world of network TV and digital TV?
Well, it's yeah. First of all, budgets are a little bit less, but I mean, you go from having a 100-person crew on The Price is Right to having a couple of guys you have behind these cameras right now,
Right.
who, just a small crew of maybe 3 or 4. But the real learning curve for me was understanding, and another word of advice to anyone who wants to get in the industry: always be a student.
Yeah.
Continually, because the industry changes as we're speaking,
Constantly.
and you've got to adapt quickly. You got to be really fluid, and so you're always learning. Now, so what I did is, okay, I'm in digital. I'm going to write a sketch for digital purposes, and I was used to, with Isaac Airfreight, for our albums or live shows, doing a 10-minute sketch.
Right.
So I write a 10-minute sketch. That doesn't fly in the digital arena. I mean, it's disposable stuff that you want to watch for less than 2 minutes. In fact, there was a day when YouTube said it had to be under 2 minutes.
Yeah.
That's all changed, of course, but because of bandwidth and things like that, practical reasons. But so I had to learn to write comedy in a whole different thing. I had to get to the punchline and the real joke and what I was trying to convey within 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So you're always changing. So it was a real different type of thing.
And now, after doing that, after being involved in the early stages of internet TV, you eventually became involved in Mastermedia and are now the CEO.
Right.
And explain a little bit about what Mastermedia is and what it does.
Well, let me go back a step. Dr. Larry Pullen founded Mastermedia in 1985.
Yep.
And it was to be a Christian connection point relationally. One-on-one relational outreach to the mainstream media leaders. And leaders. And that's key, and that's really evolving and changing today. But in those days, as you know, Phil, there were 6 film studios.
Yep.
And there were 3 TV networks. This is even before Fox came in. There was no cable.
When Larry started.
When Larry started. And there was the industry was shaped in a very top-down, steep pyramid.
Yeah.
So if you got to that head guy, the head of the studio, head of the network, they could affect change.
Big time.
So all you need to do is, I mean, hey, if you can lead them to the Lord, that's terrific. But that's not the agenda. You want to speak into their lives and start a relationship where you can create a dialogue where they might consider Christian values or the Christian audience within their programming. And it was extremely effective for many, many years. And if you want to say a dividing line, it wasn't that abrupt, but I would say 2005. Yeah. Suddenly we have a plethora, which I use that word a lot. I use that word a lot.
Awesome word.
But you have all these cable outlets. Yeah. You have your premium cable, HBO and Showtime, etc. You have the digital platforms like YouTube, et cetera, and now you have the streaming, where Netflix is the behemoth. And so you have all these different gatekeepers, and because of digital, where any kid with a cell phone can have a production studio, and they have a global megaphone via the internet, they can be their own, film production studio and distributor. So it's the democratization. Yeah. So that means there's the flattening.
Right.
The guy at the top is becoming more and more of a content manager. He doesn't have as much because there's so many layers of corporate takeovers.
Right.
And people board of directors to answer to, shareholders, etc. So it's really a different thing. So getting back to the focus of Mastermedia, we say that we are a trusted voice to the media influencers of today and an encouraging voice of experience to the media leaders of tomorrow. It's a twofold thing. We are a trusted voice to the influencers of today. It could be a kid who has 20 million hits on his YouTube channel. That's an influencer.
Huge.
And so we want to establish relationship with them, and they can trust us. We don't go to the press. We don't talk about.
Or it can be the president of a cable network.
Or it can be the president of a cable network or Netflix or something like that. So all levels of influencers that have an influence, and then we also really it's imperative, and it's really the passion of my heart to be that encouraging voice of experience to the media leaders of tomorrow. The on-ramps are much quicker than when you and I were starting out.
Right.
When I came into CBS, there were people that had already been there 20 years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Trying to get to my level. God just opened a door very high up for me, but it was hard. Now you can almost overnight if you're in the right place.
Yeah, when I came out here in '76, my roommate worked for Midnight Special. Remember that
Right.
concept
Oh, yeah.
show, Midnight Special. And the unions had a lock on everything.
Yes.
I tried
Absolutely.
to get in. You had to be a relative of somebody if you wanted to get in. And you were just really locked out of the business.
Yeah.
And there wasn't the independent production that's gone on since.
Yeah.
So it's a completely different world for somebody coming in.
And another thing about it is the way we develop content has changed. Back in '85, we'll use that as a benchmark year, it was all about broadcast.
Yeah.
It's the old, what they call it, America's Fireplace, the television, where really the entire nation gathers around to watch one show, Bonanza, on Sunday nights, or Ed Sullivan or something like that back in the old, that wasn't '85, that was way back. But we all got, and we watched the same thing. So it was broadcast, so everything had to be very general, broad,
massive
for everybody.
audience.
Then when cable came in, led by HBO, suddenly it became more narrowcast. We were focused a little bit more on a particular audience. But now with digital, we are niche cast.
Yeah.
I mean, we are looking for people groups. It's like, is there a community that likes golf?
Yeah.
So we can do the golf channel because I want to hit that community. And so what this goes into, I said Mastermedia was a voice of faith.
Yeah.
The reason that is so important is because you have all the diverse communities in America that are going into the media boardrooms, some of the gatekeepers, whatever it might be, and they are the voice for their community, and they're insisting, or they're at least pushing, for their community to be represented on our screens.
Yeah.
The missing voice is the voice of the Christian community.
Yeah.
It's absent. Part of that is, a lot of that is our fault.
Absolutely.
We have to own that, but we also need to make inroads into that where we say, hey, we've got a wonderful community.
Yeah.
We have a large community. It's depending on how you look at it, it's probably 60% of America at the least.
Yeah.
So
well,
that's
and
what
I
we
tell
do.
people that Hollywood, I've talked about it before on another episode. Hollywood is not anti-Christian in my experience.
No.
They just don't know anything about us. They
Exactly.
didn't grow up in that environment.
Exactly.
They don't understand what
Yeah.
makes us tick. And so I think a big part of what you do is educate leaders in the media on what the Christian community is like,
Yep.
which I think makes a huge impact.
Yeah, it does. They don't really know us, and again, we have to take a lot of the blame for that because, especially back in the '70s, '80s, if you were a Christian and you wanted to go to Hollywood, you'd say, "Oh, you're compromising. You shouldn't go in there." And so they didn't have those representations of what it is to be a Christian. One thing we hear time and time again is, whoa, I never knew Christians were like you.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. And see, that's really important.
And there's that executive who said, oh, I know Christians, they're the angry people.
Yes.
Because all he knew was they got angry when he'd do a show they didn't like.
Exactly. Because that's all they heard from us.
Yes.
They heard protest, they heard boycott, they heard, unfortunately, a few hate letters. But we're going in there and saying, hey, we're a great community. We embrace, we compliment them on programming they get right.
Yeah.
And we try to encourage them. And we also enter into those personal relationships with them.
So this is interesting. Having seen this for all these years and been involved as long as you have, let's talk about those perceptions. How do we change the way Hollywood looks at the Christian community? Because you're right, in many ways it's our fault, because all we've done is spew on them when we don't like shows they do. But the truth is they do a lot of right things.
Yeah.
And how do we encourage them to focus more on the program that's driven by values and things that we would like? How do we get them to change?
Well, first of all, we have to, Paul in Philippians says whatever is praiseworthy and whatever. We need to congratulate them and thank them when they do good things. When we see a show that we go, man, that really encouraged me. That was good. That was inspiring, or whatever it might be. We need to send an email or whatever it might be. Let them know there's this audience out there. So they need to see that side. We also need more and more, and thankfully it's really happening, young people going into the industry. both on the content side where they're building a YouTube channel or maybe an independent film world, something like that, where they're doing content that is it's done with excellence, but it's also reflective of their faith. And we need more of those voices, but then we need even behind the scenes, the technicians, because those are the guys, my example, Price is Right. I'm rubbing shoulders with those guys every single day. And you go through life together. As you know, Peggy, my wife, struggled with cancer through most of the years that I was at CBS. And, you know, they understood. They watched me. How I remember one guy came up to me and said, "How can you believe in a God that would give your wife cancer? And, man, why don't you just, you know, forget about him?" And I said, "Oh, no, he's the guy I run to in these hard parts, because he's with me in this journey." But when they see that, when they see how I reacted, suddenly that's the ones that come up to me at the craft services and say, "Oh, well, now I've got cancer. You know, how do you do it?" So we need that relational connect. Right. We need those examples working in the industry, but we also need those examples of our content that's done with real excellence and kind of hits the cultural zeitgeist. Where we go, wow, that really spoke to what we're going through as a culture.
So maybe there's a creative person watching this, someone in Charlotte or Tulsa or Dallas or Chicago who feels called to come to Hollywood. What would you tell them? How would you caution them? How would you encourage them? Would you tell them not to come? What would you say?
Well, first of all, I'd say come if you feel that's the way God wired you.
Okay.
And that's important, because I think so many want to be in Hollywood. It's like, you know,
the competition is enormous.
Yeah, it's a dream factory, and you know, it's like, oh, that looks so glamorous, that looks so fun, and we know that's not. But it is a joy if that's the way you're wired. When I was 5 years old, I saw the Dick Van Dyke Show, and I said, that's all I want to do. I want to be a comedy writer. I want to work in television. I want to marry a perky brunette, and I married a perky brunette. You know, it's like that, there was nothing else I could do. You know, it's like, you're not going to stop me.
Right.
So if you have that kind of drive and passion, but also, you know, innate talent in it, go for it. Go for it. You know, you should do it. But two things I'll say. One, understand the industry. Get to know it. Get to know where the pitfalls are. Get to know where the on-ramps are. Things to avoid. How to behave properly as a Christian within the industry.
I tell people, lead with your talent, don't lead with your faith. You know, how many people do we know who's come out and went into a network meeting and said, God's called me to come here and change Hollywood? And they get laughed off the lot.
They do. And so you don't lead with it. But stay strong in your convictions. I think people admire, certainly it's my or the things that I've seen, people admire people of firm convictions.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I don't believe. I mean, there are that segment.
You don't have to be a jerk to have firm convictions.
No. When I walk into an office, they know what I believe. But I'm not weird about it or judgmental or whatever. They just know, and you know, these are my convictions. The other thing I would say, I use it when I speak at colleges. I'll say, prepare to be surprised. And what I mean by that is, you've got to prepare. Learn your craft, form your networks, develop your project. If you're a filmmaker, your reel. If you're a writer, your scripts. You know, really get prepared to do something great. And then if you do your preparation, where you're ready when the opportunity opens, if you do your preparations and God has called you to this arena, I think he'll surprise you with opportunity. That's been the case with me. Isaac Air Freight, it just kind of happened. My time, I was in radio for a while, that just happened. My time with CBS, with digital media, all these things happened because of a relationship or just out of the blue a phone call.
Amazing.
But I was ready.
I was ready.
When Mike Klossman asked me, do you have a game show? I got it.
You got it.
I already developed it.
Yes. Well, you know, I do tell people that a great idea is the worst thing in the world if it's the only one you got.
That's right.
Always have some backups. Be ready to pitch something.
That's right.
And have your stuff in order. Say something else too about your wife Peggy. One of the things that I've written on my blog a couple times about is the fact that your spouse needs to be on the same page if you want to come to Hollywood.
Absolutely.
I mean, most of the failures I've seen, you know, the people that have left left, not because they weren't gifted or talented or didn't have opportunities, but because one of the spouses, the husband or the wife, just hated living here and didn't want to move. And I've seen people who had great talent and great gifts, but they never realized because the spouse didn't want to come. So how important has it been that you and Peggy, like Kathleen, my wife, and I have been on the same page? How important is that?
It's critical because all aspects, in marriage is a give and take and an understanding and come to mutual agreement. How many kids you're going to have, maybe where you're going to live, or whatever it might be. When I was already in my comedy group when I met Peggy, so she knew that this is my passion, doing it.
Yeah.
She knew very little about, really even about film. I grew up, I watched films constantly. I was always in that movie theater when I was a little kid. She didn't know much about it, but she started coming along. Sometimes she would do even our sound when we toured, and she just started loving it and loving it. And then when the CBS opened, there was even a time that she was the temp secretary in the offices there. And so she's been with me either behind the scenes or alongside with me every step of the way. And then it grew so much that now she's the associate director of the Wind Rider Forum, which is an outreach that we do at the Sundance Film Festival.
All right. How to reach Mastermedia? Mastermedia.com, right?
Mastermedia.com is our website, and you can subscribe to our e-newsletter, our newsletter, as well as our prayer calendar, which can get emailed out to you.
Explain the prayer calendar.
The prayer calendar is every day of the year. We have two people to pray for. One is more on the decision-making, executive side, and the other is on more of the creative side, the influencer. And there's two people each day that we will send out a email to your phone that says, pray for these two people. And first of all, it's the power of prayer to change people's lives. You never know what God is doing. We always say, people are one miracle away from coming to the Lord. But also, when I go to a conference or industry gathering and I meet with somebody, to be able to say, there's tens of thousands of Christians across the nation who prayed for you last Wednesday. They're amazed by it.
That's amazing.
It's like they care about me, so it's really important. So go to our website. There's a lot of different things you can read and videos, etc. Mastermedia.
Well, I'm a big fan of Mastermedia, and I'd encourage you to consider supporting what they do financially. They're making a huge. Keep in mind, Hollywood is the most influential center in the world. They impact the world with the decisions they make and the programs and the stories they tell. So support what they're doing because they're making a huge difference trying to impact the industry for the gospel. And remember, join us at philcook.com. We're talking about these issues on my blog all the time. I'd love for you to check it out. And if you know someone that's thinking about going into the industry, or if you know somebody who thinks Hollywood's the enemy, share this episode with them because I really believe that can make a huge difference in their thinking about how to approach the industry and how to start actually praying. It's so funny, Christians talk about the power of prayer, but are we really praying for the industry in Hollywood? That would have so much results if we could just do that for real. So join us. And by the way, remember, if you haven't gone to my unique planner, check it out. uniquecreativeplanner.com. That's right, uniquecreativeplanner.com. Check it out. It's my print planner that people are going crazy about. I'm sure you check it out here. I'll give you a gift for being a guest. See,
lovely parting
there
gifts.
You go,
now I'm back at my Price is Right.
You get swag when you come on, on this.
Thank you.
So join us, talk about it, because we want to help you as a creative person get from where you are to where you need to be. So stay in touch. We're going to be doing future episodes on subject like this, and it'll make a huge impact on you. Thanks for watching.